The Mthwakazi humanitarian problem, a time to act. There is a humanitarian problem at Mthwakazi, and indeed, this is the time to act. Failure to act now will exacerbate the problem and leading to further complications. What we are dealing with here is a nation under siege. And we have no choice but to tell whoever in the world cares to listen. The city of Bulawayo and the surrounding areas, called or known as Mthwakazi or Matabeleland, has been under siege since 1893. From the time of the fall and the overthrow of the Ndebele kingdom, the people of that area have never known peace. Having been subjected to racism and all forms of racial discrimination, they fought a successful war against the British settler colonialism. But when independence was granted to Zimbabwe in 1980, for them, that independence did not mean anything because they have continued to suffer at the hands of the government ever since, and they continue to suffer even to the present day. To set everything in motion, let us look at the anatomy of the problem. The people of Mthwakazi, or the people of Matabeleland, as some people prefer to call them, are a stateless nation that has faced a genocide, marginalization, exclusion from all sectors of life, such as education, business and economic activities, and political space, to the point that it has become a known fact that every able Matabele leader can only aspire to the position of a deputy in whether it comes to being a member of a political organization or whatever organization it might turn out to be. Because as it has emerged since 1980, or rather since 1987, when Joshua Nkomo became the deputy president of ZANU-PF, or rather of Robert Mugabe in ZANU-PF, that is the United ZANU-PF, purportedly united, it has actually become very, very natural. In fact, it is expected that every Matabele will aspire for no position higher than that of a deputy. So there's exclusion from all sectors of life, there's discrimination based on tribal or ethnic lines. There is a widespread dehumanization of the Ndebele people, which is attained through the use of Shona language as a dominant language, whereby people from all other linguistic groups are denied the right to speak their language, because the police and the military, who wield so much power, always use Shona as the official language, to the point that use of any other language other than Shona will always lead to victimization and denial of rights. So whether one goes to the Home Affairs Department to apply for a birth certificate, an identity document, or a passport, one is subjected to Shona language, and failure to understand Shona language is actually a reason to be denied whatever service one is seeking, even if it were at a government department. So there is widespread dehumanization of all non-Shona speaking people. We are talking here about the Ndebele, the Kalanga, the Venda, the Tonga, the Soto, the Nambia, the Xhosa, the Babirwa, the Tswana, all other groups, the Shangani, whoever does not speak Shona as a language is denied all rights within government departments. And then there's also the issue of the displacement, the widespread displacement of the populations from Matabeleland, where people are being pushed out of their ancestral land and from their cities such as Bulawayo, where the you know, business tenders and everything, jobs are being allocated to Shona speaking personnel, to the point that non-Shona speaking people have come to realize that they do not have a place in that country. And as if that is not enough, there is the issue of denialism of the problem, which is perpetrated by Zimbabwe's main political actors. We are talking here about ZANU and the various MDC formations, who continue to deny that there is an ongoing genocide and marginalization against the non-Shona speaking people. And so these formations continue to endorse the status quo, and whatever political solutions the opposition parties are pursuing, it is done within the context of this currently configured Zimbabwe, whereby there is no open acknowledgement of the fact that the large masses of people are suffering all this, demeaning treatment at the hands of the security forces, as well as those that are politically well placed. And then that is aggravated by the deafening international silence and complicity by international bodies and international organizations who have openly, uh, looked away, clearly looked away from the problems in Matabeleland, pretending that everything in Zimbabwe is based on equality, that all ethnic groups are equal, and so on and so forth. And as a result, you find that people of Matabeleland continue to suffer in silence at the hands of those in the government of that country. In light of the problems highlighted above, this has left people asking themselves a number of questions, among them being the question whether Zimbabwe should continue to exist as a unitary state where Matabeleland and the Mashonaland remain one country, or a two-state solution would be the most appropriate solution for the people of Matabeleland, who have not known peace and freedom ever since the decline of the Ndebele state in 1893. So these kind of questions continue to leave tongues wagging as people search for an elusive answer to the problems, rather to the solutions for the people that have endured so much marginalization in human history. So in light of that, those who are thinking of Matabele homeland as an independent state are beginning to figure out and to imagine a new country called Mthwakazi, configured the way that is shown in this map that we have on this just before us here. The dreams of a two-state solution are inspired by the numerous questions that still remain to be answered, particularly regarding the founding and the establishment of this country called Zimbabwe. Pertinent questions include the following. What is Zimbabwe? People are asking themselves what Zimbabwe is and who is a Zimbabwean. And I am tempted to ask whether I am a Zimbabwean myself. And then, there are questions to do with what it would take for anyone to be a Zimbabwean. What is the qualification for being a Zimbabwean, in order for somebody to be called a Zimbabwean? What is the qualification? And is that qualification attainable by everybody? someone might say that these questions are irrelevant because for some people it's pretty obvious. If you were born in that territory between Zambezi and Limpopo, you are a Zimbabwean. I think it is only people who think in terms of those, you know, territorialists, if one could say, who think that because of the sovereign control of Zimbabwe by ZANU-PF government, therefore anybody found in that area, in that polity, is a Zimbabwean. But I'm tempted to think that Zimbabweanness goes beyond being born in the place, because there are people who have lived in that country, but from time to time they find that they are not Zimbabwean enough, particularly when you meet the police or when you meet the army and you suffer abuse in their hands. You soon realize that if you cannot speak Shona, and if you cannot adhere to the prevailing Shona cultural precepts, then you are not a Zimbabwean. So this really raises quite a number of questions whether Zimbabweanness is anything beyond adhering to Shona identity. And this particularly comes to the fore when one asks how Zimbabweanhood can be realizable amidst this return to Zululand rhetoric. You know, if you do not speak Shona, you're openly told straight to your face that you must go back to Zululand. That is in South Africa. Even if you have never been there, you still uh, ordered to go back where you have never been. And that raises questions about how Gukurahundi can be rationalized. Because you see, Gukurahundi started in 1980, 81, 82, thereabout. But it is a system that has continued even up to the present day, where if you are not adhering to the culture of the dominant political and the tribal group, then you are a foreigner, you are perceived as a foreigner, you are treated as a foreigner, you are literally excluded. So that raises quite a number of questions. And it brings us again to the issue of whether this National Peace and Reconciliation Commission is anything serious or is just a charade being used by ZANU-PF for their political ends. Since 18 April 1980, Zimbabwe has been dominated by men pictured in this slide. Robert Mugabe came in as the first prime minister, an executive prime minister, of course, and then as soon as he came in, assisted by Emerson Mnangagwa, who is now the current president of Zimbabwe, they put together an army which they called Gukurahundi, commanded by Perence Shiri, and then they unleashed that army on the people of Matabeleland, starting from Midlands. And that army went on to kill no less than 20,000 people in Matabeleland. As a result, the people of Matabeleland continue to ask themselves whether they really belong to this country called Zimbabwe, or they are just there by hook and crook. They happen just to be in that area, and whether they are really desired or desirable there, or they should really have another place else other than Zimbabwe. Talking about the security forces, anybody who is driven into Matabeleland has always encountered these police roadblocks manned by Shona-speaking police officers who refuse to speak any other language other than Isishona, particularly abusing those of the Matabele people who have emigrated to South Africa in search of a sanctuary. As they return home to meet their loved ones, they always face the wrath of these police men and women who have actually become the symbol of Gugurahundism. If these police officers have not been wicked enough in their treatment of people, one is reminded of Kukurahundi, or the Zimbabwe National Army, which continues as a symbol of oppression and exclusion of the people of Matabeleland. And, a sight of a National Army personnel is nothing other than traumatic experience, because this uniform, this green uniform, has always been symbolic of murder, of rape, of all forms of abuse, particularly for the people of Matabeleland. They have never been able to associate the Zimbabwe National Army uniform with anything good in their lives. The only memories it invokes are memories of torture, mass killings, mention all forms of abuse at the hands of this national army. With this in mind, one is reminded of the efforts of Joshua Mthwakazi, the gallant son of the people who fought to liberate Zimbabwe from the British settler colonial rule, ably assisted and aided by Dumiso Dabengwa and Lookout Masuku, among others. But the efforts of these men have not yielded any fruit either for themselves or for their communities. Joshua Nkomo himself at some point fled out of Zimbabwe via Botswana and ended up in London, having fled the threat to his life perpetrated by Kukurahundi, or the 5th Brigade. That was at a time when Lookout Masuku, the man in the cap, and Dumiso Dabengwa, the man in the forefront in this picture, were languishing in jail from 1982 to 1986, even as the Supreme Court of the land had declared that they had acquitted them of any criminal wrongdoing, until Lookout Masuku eventually died at a prison cell in Harare in 1986. With this, one comes to realize that the systematic exclusion of young men and women seeking education at universities and centers of learning such as the National University of Science and Technology, the United College of Education in Bulawayo, the Bulawayo Polytechnic, as well as nursing positions and studies at Mpilo Hospital, is not accidental, but it is a systematic exclusion of these young people by a government and by a system designed to exclude them, to push them out, to displace them, and to reduce them into second-hand or second-rate human beings who are second-class or third-class citizens in a country and in the land of their own forefathers. This is further exacerbated as one looks at the introduction of the Zupco monopoly, whereby all private operators of minibuses and buses are denied operating licenses, pushed out of operation, so that people from Harare and other regions can come and take over the operational space under the auspices of Zupco, where licensing itself is very unpredictable and is not above board. And the problem is aggravated by the closure of factories such as Dunlop and all these other factories that used to be in Bulawayo, which during the time of the colonial rule was the industrial hub of the then Rhodesia. So with the closure of these factories and businesses, you find that people are rendered jobless. Meanwhile, even the few industries that are still in operation, only the people from Mashonaland are employed there, while the rest of the people from Matabeleland, from Binga to Beitbridge, from Plumtree to Munyati, are actually excluded from all forms of gainful employment in those factories. That indeed highlights the Matabele displacement as an international humanitarian problem. It is a problem that needs first to be identified by the international community and then to be systematically studied, and as well as to be acknowledged, so that you see a solution may begin to be sought for the problem. Besides that, the people of Matabeleland continue to be displaced and pushed out of their own land and their own territory. The pictures shown on this slide speak a lot. They say that a picture is worth 1,000 words. We see men and women disembarking from a truck in undesignated pickup point as they cross the borders into South Africa, scaling the fence. Men and women scaling the fence, crawling under the fence. Some of them walking through flooded rivers, crossing the flooded river Limpopo as they search for a better life in South Africa, which has only proven to be the only sanctuary for them since 1982, when they began to flee the Gukurahundi atrocities. So as a result of these atrocities and the genocide that has been ongoing ever since, men and women continue with children on their back to look for a sanctuary in South Africa. Regrettably, that sanctuary itself has not proved to be welcoming. As clearly as can be seen, the illegal immigration into South Africa causes a myriad of problems for the South African people and the South African communities themselves. With so many people from Mthwakazi living in Hillbrow, in Berea, in Uvel, and in all the surrounding areas, there's no telling the impact, negative impact, that their presence in South Africa continues to impact. For instance, you are talking about millions of undocumented people, people with no IDs, people who cannot be engaged in formal employment, giving birth to children that never get documented and therefore are not able to go into school. And that no doubt explains part of the complaint that South African people have regarding the expansion of these and the proliferation of these informal settlements and informal living conditions, which turn out to be breeding grounds for crime and all forms of deviant human behavior. But how could that be solved unless the problem is confronted head on? Surely, it is very regrettable that millions of people from the city called Bulawayo have for 40 years, 41 years and beyond continued to watch life from the terraces for 4 decades as spectators in the game of life where they are supposed to be the main actors. They continue to be denied operating space, they continue to be sidelined, and they continue at the periphery of life. And that cannot go on unabated. Having come to the realization of the issues highlighted in the foregoing discussion, it is very important to map the way forward. I suggest that there should be a systematic study of the displaced populations, and this should be undertaken by an international task team, which should involve the state of South Africa, because the problems spilling from Matabeleland have actually spilled into South Africa as the major destination for most of the displaced people, and of course Botswana as well, and Zambia as the main recipients of these displaced peoples from Matabeleland. Of course, we are talking here about South Africa, we are talking about Botswana, we are talking also about Namibia, that is within the SADC region, not mentioning those who have gone overseas into the United Kingdom, the United States of America, the Pacific Islands, and all over the world. So a systematic study of the displaced Matabele populations internally, that is those that are dispossessed of their land, hereditary land there in Matabeleland, which I'll prefer to call the internal displacement, as well as the external displacement. We are talking about how many millions reside in Hillbrow and Berea, Yeoville, and the rest of the world. It's because this systematic study would help to establish the extent of the problem, as a way of also finding out how best such a problem would have to be resolved. And of course, there should be continued internal political pressure on the ZANU-PF regime, as being mounted by such groups as Zulu and Mthwakazi, and of course not underplaying the role played by the Mthwakazi Republic Party and other Matabele political formations, who have continued to mount pressure on the government of Zimbabwe and on the systems of Zimbabwe, conscientizing the people as well about the importance the importance of looking at the Matabele problem as a peculiar problem that deserves a peculiar solution, not just a part of Zimbabwe's political crisis. Of course, there should be international lobbying to call for the attention of the SADC community. That is, all SADC states must be informed about this. The African Union must also be made aware, so that there should be Matabele task teams that go out to meet with the SADC, with the African Union, bring the matter to the United Nations organization, and many other international organizations of relevance in this particular case, because without their knowledge, without their attention, or rather without their awareness of this problem, it will continue to escalate unabated. Regional lobbying among the citizens of the countries where people have been displaced is also very important. So those who are staying in South Africa must make an effort to conscientize those in the South African community. Commendable works, of course, have been done by such groups as Uloyiko, a South African Xhosa drama group that has done so much in terms of drawing attention to the problem of Gukuraundi and the displacement of the people of Matabeleland. Certainly, the people of Matabeleland must be unapologetic when it comes to these issues. They must speak and speak and speak until the matter is heard all over the world. This video has been presented to you by Philani L Ndlovu in collaboration with iClass Virtual, a 2021 copyright. Thank you very much.